Hello everybody. This is going to be a walkthrough of this new world building platform, GatewayForge. This is not going to be a world showcase or anything like that. This is intended to show how to use this software and how to navigate it and how to go about building your own projects. When you first open it up, you should see something like this. To start, you'll select a directory where all of your projects are going to be stored. I already have this folder that I've been working out of, so I'm going to select that. And you'll see all of my projects. For this video, I'm going to use a project that I've already been working on. When you first open the software, you'll be on the editor. At the top left-hand corner, you can click and select the different workspace. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can select Settings, and you can toggle Expanded or Collapsed if you want it to be compact, or if you want to see all of the available workspaces. On the left-hand side, you have a navigation bar. You can toggle this in and out. The way that this software works is you have entities that you can create in this Entities panel by right-clicking and creating a blank entity, or you can go with the right arrow and you can specify a type or even a subtype. So this, when I create a character, it creates a type character. If I double click, you can see I have the character here. This is the type, and I can specify a subtype, or I can do it on the left hand side by clicking the second right arrow. If there is a type or a subtype that is not found here, all I need to do is type it in, and it becomes an option. Same thing. Now, animal doesn't have any subtypes, but if I type a new one, now I can select a subtype of dog. If there's a type that you've created that you don't want anymore and you want to get rid of it, first you have to make sure that there is no entity that has that type anymore. Then go down in the bottom left-hand corner to the display options, go to types, right-click, delete. You'll notice now I still have some entities here that are type entity. And so if I try to right-click and delete, it won't go away. This list builds automatically from all of the entities that are in your project. On the right-hand side, you see this information panel. This is where you can customize all of the data on an entity. So I can add a description. I can add tags. I can right-click to select an image. I can add tasks. And when I add a task, you'll notice on the left-hand side, this number increases. And so all of the tasks that you add to all of the entities get aggregated here all of the incomplete tasks get aggregated here. And if I complete it, you'll see it goes away. On the right hand side, if you want to see your completed tasks, you can click this and you'll see your completed tasks. If I want to add more information, I can come down here to section. I'm going to add a history section. And now this is another snippet. I can also add a data set. And this could be a number. Could be a reference to another entity in my project. It could be a string. Or it could be true false to toggle if yes or no. Or it could be a date, which you need a calendar selected for a date to work. Once you've selected a calendar, then you can see this ... When you click that, you can select your date. What else can I do? I can also add a relations section. And this is a way for me to create new relations of any type. So I'm going to rename this into the floating tower. I'm going to say it's a location tower. And you'll notice the icon and the color change. For the entity and the relation types, I can specify a color for all of those types with this input here. If I left click, I can choose any RGB value. If I right click, I can select a color in the current theme. And so what this means is if I choose, let's say characters, I want to make all the characters yellow in the current theme. Then if I change the theme, the yellow shade changes to whatever that shade is in the theme. Let's say I've created an entity that doesn't have an icon. What I can do is I can come back to display options in the bottom left. I go to the options tab and I can click on this Google icons, which will open a new window. This is thousands and thousands of available icons that you can use in this software. So the way that this works is the key is what you want it to be, for example, school, and then the icon is whatever this code is here. So I'm going to look for school. That seems fine for me. So I'm going to type school, and the icon code happens to be school. I'll add, and you'll see the icon now shows. So to manage relations here, you can start by clicking the add icon, and this allows you to search for any other entity in your project. You can specify whether or not the opened entity, in this case the floating tower, is the source or the target of the relation. So in this case, I'm going to say the cities folder is the source, floating tower is the target, and I'm going to create a contains relation. Now you'll see the relation show up here. And if I go to cities, you'll see the floating tower. You can use this to create any type of relation that you want. Additionally, you can create an events section, and this will show all of the events of an entity. So Ralph, for example, has multiple different events. With this as a shared date toggled on, I can right click any date and it will snap to that date in the calendar. So what's nice is right now all of these say Ralph, and later in the video I made these out of order. I forgot to showcase the relations and sections event as I was making this video, so I'm showing this as it makes sense in the video that you're watching, but this will be created later in this video. But what you see is you have multiple different events, all for this entity. This is an event relation, and I can specify the name of the individual event without changing the name of the entity. So here we have birth, here we have goes to school, so just to showcase that you can name the individual events themselves, even though this is technically a relation. I can toggle here between showing the information like the date, the start and end date, or the description of the event. Let's say I've created an entity that I want to use as a template. I can come down to these options. I can click Save. I can open this entity, go down to Options, Presets. And this is a way that you can easily duplicate information or create templates of other entities. Now, it's important to note, so in this workspace, I can click and drag to open an entity in the workspace. Let's say I'm going to create a character template like we did over here. So this guy's name is Ralph. Here is some content. And this is just to show you that this template will also duplicate the content in the editor. So I have Ralph opened here. I can save this as a preset. Then when I create a new entity, I can apply that preset. And the content is the same. This should also work for things like map layers, but it does not copy the relations. The editor is fairly straightforward. This is what you start with. You can create different sections. Right, you have a paragraph, you have headers, you have lists, which can be indented with Tab and Shift Tab. I can right click to change the icon type if I want to do checklists or something like that. I can, when I hover over a section, I see this little drag icon. I can click and drag to reorder the sections. In the table section, on the right side, I can add more columns. It automatically becomes scrollable. I can add more rows. When you have data like this, if you want to view this as a graph, you can come up to the options, sub-options as graph. And so this allows you to essentially embed graphs instead of tables inside your documents. Let's say you have text instead of numbers. It will just omit the cells that cannot be converted into a number or cannot be read as a number. At the bottom, you'll notice this previous and next. This allows you to essentially, or I can add an entity here if I want to be able to navigate from one document to the next. And I can add as many as I want. At the top, you'll notice the toolbar. I can toggle on annotations, branches, or more information about the opened entity. I can assign a point of view to a document. I can also add it, link it to the timeline or the calendar. On the left, you'll notice the branches. This allows you to create different versions of content for an entity. So if you're editing or if you're making changes, you can easily separate your edits and updates. If I make edits here, I have this version selected. So I make edits, it will update the version, not the actual content on the entity. If I make a branch from that version now, it's using that most recent edit. You'll notice the other versions are unchanged. To add an annotation, I can select a chunk of text, right click, and I'll add an annotation that way. I can assign a priority 1, 2, or 3, or none at all. I can change the type of annotation from action, or it's just a note, a normal annotation, or it's a warning. I can also assign mentions through annotations to any entity. Annotations can also be added directly in text. So let's say I'm going to write about the floating tower. I can press the @ key. I can start typing the floating tower. And when I select, it adds it into the text. If I've already written some text and I want to create an entity or add a relation that way, I can select some text, right click, and I can either search for an existing entity to add as a mention, or I can create a new one. I can right click a mention to open it, or I can remove the mention. can add tags to the entity itself. Which will also show up here. Or I can add tags directly onto a section. If I want to add the tags, but I don't want to look at this, I can toggle it off by going to the options and clicking the tag icon. At the top, you'll notice this style or format bar. You can change the alignment of the entire document, or I can change the alignment by section. I can also set a background to a section. This will default to a theme color. If I click remove, it'll clear the background color. I can change the font of the entire document. I can also change the font of the entire application. In the editor, you have two different views, one for writing and one for analysis. The analysis view lets you look at all of the content that you've written across all of your entities in the entire project. And you can search and filter through all of the different sections using things like tags or mentions. I had two different types of floating towers, so this is where that's mentioned. Or I can just type a normal search string. Next, we're going to look at the Calendar Workspace. Right now, I have the calendar of Harpdos loaded in to this project. I can have as many calendars as I want, and I can configure them to be however I want. So, for example, I'm going to create a new blank calendar. It defaults to 1 month with 30 days and 1 weekday. So to start, I'm going to create some new weekdays. We'll have 9. In the top, in the toolbar, I can toggle on and off, and I can select months to add more months. I can rename. I can navigate month by month with these two arrows. You'll notice the format at the top, first of month 1, and then the time. That shows this timestamp format, which I can change if I want to shorten the month. This parses a string like this, so you can customize your date formats. And there's going to be a resource posted that outlines what you can do here. If you want eras to be a part of this, you can click on the eras option. I'll create 2. And I'm just going to use before common era and common era for simplicity here. I'll set an abbreviation for each of them. This one is the starting era. This one is the ending era. And this one actually ends on the last day of the last month of year -1. And so now, as I sort through different dates, you'll see the era change. If I don't want to use negative years, I can toggle negative years off. And the year will display as positive. I have multiple different views. Right now I'm looking at a month. I can look at a week, or I can look at an entire year. Now to create events, this is where we start to work more with relations. These are all of your entities. They're organized using a contains relation, meaning this entity contains this entity, source ID, target ID, and then the type of the relation in this case is contains. I can click and drag an entity onto the calendar and it creates an event relation. And that means this calendar is the source, this entity is the target, this is the relation itself. So I can have multiple event relations for a single entity. Now if I click on an event, I can open the event relation itself. And so you'll see this is an entity, this is a relation, it is unknown calendar pointing to Ralph. And the event relation has this special section with the start date and the end date. So if I want to change the end date, I can click on that, adjust the days, and you'll see it move across. I'm going to go back to the month view, and you'll see Ralph here. I can click and drag Ralph, or this event, to change the start date, or I can click and drag this little box at the end of it to change the end date. If I move the start after the end, it clears the end date. If I move the end before the start, it also clears the end date. If the event is the duration that I know and I want to lock the duration, for example, to 3 days here, I can click this little lock icon, and now if I change the start date, it updates the end date. I can also set events to be conditional to other events. For example, I want this one to start 5 days after the start of this one. So with this event selected, I can come up to this function icon. I can select days after, start of, and this one starts on the 7th. So this is 0 days after the start of that one, so it's same day. If I move this first one, the second one will update. Now if I change this to 5 days after the start of, you'll see it update here. One of the big things about calendars is cycles and moons. In the top toolbar, I can select moons to create as many moons as I want. So if I want to adjust these moons, I can change the period of each of them. Let's say that I want the calendar to start on not the first day of the week. I can go to the weekdays option. I need to make sure that wrap weekdays is on, and then I can select an offset. The same works for moons. By default, a moon's full moon is on the first day of the first month. And so I can change that. I can select a moon and I can set an offset. There are a handful of built-in calendars. For example, the Gregorian calendar, which is our real world, Harpdos, and some others. Next is the Timeline Workspace. At the top, I can click and drag to adjust the date. This date in the top right corner corresponds to the leftmost pixel. If I scroll in and out, it adjusts the scale, so I can change how much time that I'm looking at. I can also, when I scroll, it adjusts around the mouse position. I can use this scale option and it will adjust from the leftmost spot. I can click and drag to change the date. And now remember, this event depends on this one. So if I move this one, that one will change. When I hover over the end of it, you'll see this little bar show up. If I click and drag that, it adjusts the end date. This end date is locked, so as I move it, the end date also moves. If I have an entity that is not locked, when I move it, the end date stays and the start moves. If I want to see all the labels, I can come up to the options and I can toggle labels on. There's a faint line that goes from the start of the event to the top, and I can also toggle those on and off if I want. By default, this will show all of the events in a project. If I want to create sub-calendars, essentially, what I can do is in the Timeline Workspace, whatever is opened in the workspace, which is, you can see in the top right corner, if I click and drag to create new events, you'll see this indicator is now yellow. That means that this event is assigned to this timeline. To add an event that's already here, I can right-click to assign, or I can right-click to unassign. If I want to look at only the assigned events, I can come to the top and select this filter. What we're looking at here is the scaled view. We can also look at a chronology of all the events in order. What's nice about GatewayForge is that you can work with multiple different calendars for the same set of events. So when we created these events, it was with this unknown calendar. But I can still see these events when I have this calendar selected. And I'm gonna be able to see when these events happen on this calendar versus this one. It represents the same point in time. And I can look at this, I can look at multiple different calendars at once. Now, I can link these two workspaces together so that I'm looking at the same date by toggling this icon on. So I can look at the same events on different calendars, or I can look at the same calendar at two different zoom values. The point is the flexibility is here. Next, we can look at the Map Workspace. I've already built out this map a little bit to showcase a bit of what you can do. To start, in the top left, you have your options, which are tied to the entity. I can change the distance units and the scale. Right now, this is saying every 1 pixel is 1 mile. If I select an entity, you'll notice there's a distance line that tells you in this distance units how far from the location to the cursor. I can adjust the scale so that 1 pixel is equal to 100 miles. And now you'll see 52,000 miles, 71,000 miles. I can also toggle on show rings, and this will render distance rings around the selected location. I have layers that I can customize, and I can toggle them on and off. I have a background image that was created using Incarnate. When I select this image layer, I can choose the file path by clicking on this plus image, or I can remove the image. I'll come back to use as boundary. Then we're going to look at a locations layer next. So let's look at all the cities. Right, I can toggle this on and you'll notice these purple diamonds indicating all of the cities in this world. This third mode on the left is for creating a new location. And now going back to the entities and the relations, these are dictated by a location relation, meaning this is the source, these are the targets, the type of relation is location. So if I select a location here, let's see, I'll right click to open the relation in the info panel. You'll notice location as the relation. This location relation is what stores the position, the size, the style, everything about how it shows up on the map. To create new locations, I can select this creation mode. I can left click to create a new entity, or I can right click to add an existing entity. I can right click to remove the location relation. This does not delete the entity itself. If I right click to delete here, this is trying to delete the entity. Remove will delete the relation. And that's how it works over here as well. Remove for the relation, delete for the entity. Instead of having to click and sift through all of this every time, I can set a default type to a layer. And so then when I have the creation mode selected, I can shift click to easily create new entities of that type and subtype. Next, we have regions, which are similar to locations, but the relation type is region. So to select a region, I need to select the layer. This info icon opens the entity. Right-click info opens the relation. And you'll notice the relation type is now region, not location. This dictates how it renders here and allows me to create points for the boundary. So let's create a new region. I'm going to say that this is part of the fortified island. I already have fortified island here. I can actually just click and drag. And again, it's two separate region relations, but it's the same entity. To adjust the boundary, I can right-click, edit. You'll notice that these vertex points will snap to other locations or vertices. I want it to be the same color, so I can click on this region, right click, and I'm going to select teal. If I accidentally move a region, I can undo to get it back. Next, we can look at paths. Paths are a series of points that can connect two locations or two other points. So again, you need a paths layer. I'm going to hide the regions for now. And to create a new path, once you have the right layer selected, you can click on this creation mode, and you'll notice a circle wherever there is a vertex point. This lets you easily snap exactly to other points. I can left click to add more points, and then right click to end the path. If I want to adjust it, I can go to selection, right click, edit, and I can adjust the points. Then I right click, stop editing, and the path is updated. In the right hand corner here, I can adjust the dash style. I could have a solid line. I can change the color. I can change the width. I can also change the opacity to make it transparent. So this lets me create roads. I can indicate C routes. The interpretation of these paths is up to the individual, but you'll notice this is a world map. There's another map view that I can use called globe. And this lets me wrap that image around a sphere, and I can still see all the paths and locations. The neat part about this is that you can get trade routes to wrap around the outside of the map. So this edge connects to this edge, and I want these paths to seem like they're one, as they do here. To get this effect, what you can do is you can go to the image that you're using as the background or the size of the map. You can select use as boundary, and then you can notice these path points show up with a circle on the boundary. So I'm going to create a new path from here. To get this boundary, I need to create the path, and when I go to edit, I can't move a point past the boundary. When I stop editing, you'll notice the circle. This then shows up on the other side, so I can continue creating a path. Right click to end, and now those will line up when I go back to the globe view. If I double click, it also opens that entity in the info panel. Going back to the globe view now, we can add things into orbit. So for example, I can right click, add orbit, and I'm going to add a moon. And now we have this moon with a period of 30 and altitude of 2000. So we can adjust this push it out a little farther. A moon is nice. I'm going to create a space station. And so for this, I'm going to make it a location. I'm going to change render as to 3D model. Specifically, it needs to be a GLB or GLTF. And then I need to select the file, which I have in my project folder. And it will load as so. I'm going to change the rotation. Now, what's neat about these orbits is that they are also tied to time. You have a period, this is number of days to orbit. And so if I change the date, the position adjusts. This feature is more experimental right now and is being built out in future versions. Going back to the default view, we can now talk more about how these maps are tied to time. So at the top left, you have this timestamps toolbar. This is where you can manage adjusting your maps over time. I have these two timestamps right now. This Empire of the Sand, I have set to hide before first timestamp. To create a timestamp, right, I'll select a region, a path, or a location, right click, and when I hit timestamp, it takes the current date, the exact date, down to the second, and it creates a timestamp of that current position or the boundaries. If I set hide before first timestamp and I select a date before, it will not exist. Then I'll click this date, it shows up, and then at the next timestamp, the regions have shifted. If you have all your layers selected, things can start to slow down if you have way too many elements. Notably, the paths seem to take up a lot of renders. There are a lot of points involved. So these updates work faster when you have certain layers hidden. I can use these arrows to easily toggle through the timestamps. I can have as many different timestamps as I want. And then this button shows you the path that is taken, or all of the changes that are made. So you can somewhat see that this Empire of the Sand, you can see the faint boundary from the other timestamp. And same with this Mountain Wood Elves. To indicate this, this line is the anchor position of the region. The points are relative to this anchor point. These are actually the center of all the points for regions. For locations, I'm going to create, for example, a characters layer. I'm going to set the creation type to character, and I'll use a pen. I can shift click to create a new character. I'm going to make sure I'm on the first timestamp. I can snap the position to this location. I'll timestamp it. I'll select the next timestamp. Set the timestamp, and you'll see the path that is taken across all of this character's timestamps. So let's say I'll go another year in the future. Now he's at this one. And you'll see the whole path. In the Storyboard Workspace, we can visualize the collections that we create using all of these different relations. So for example, I'm going to open this planet that we've been working with, and we can see all of the contains relations. All of this stuff is contained by this entity. So I open that one in the scene view with the contains relation selected, and I get to see all of those entities. The one that I select is the one that's visible here. This entity in the top right dictates the collection. The selected item in the collection is what's visible. You can change the relation type using this in the top right as the source, and it will change the collection. For example, these are all the regions. These are all the locations. These are all the paths. In the board view, you get to see a list, an ordered list. And in this view, you have two relation options. Contains is the first one. This top right entity contains all of these. And the second one, so I can go contains, and it will drill two layers down. In the top right toolbar, I can toggle between the lists or the one level information. So this will show an image and a description. In the scene view, the open scene, in the toolbar, I can toggle the info on and off, and I can toggle the layers on and off. I can also zoom in and out. For example's sake, I'm going to show you how the layers work. By default, you always have a background layer. You can leave it blank. If you select it, you can change the width and the height, or you can change the background color. I can add more layers. And these layers allow me to draw onto the canvas. I can also add stamps. So I can select a stamp. Need to make sure the opacity is on. And this lets me start to create whatever scenes that I want. Getting more towards what you would expect from a storyboard. Still a long way to go with this workspace, but this lets you do more. One thing that you can do in a layer is you can toggle the render depth so that images that are lower appear in front and images that are farther or higher appear behind. In the top right, I can use these arrows to easily flip through the different scenes essentially. But again, these all depend on the relation type that you're using. So it's up to you how you kind of configure and set these storyboards up. You could use this as a simple presentation if you want to just be able to flip through a collection. Totally up to you. Next, we have the Gallery Workspace. So any entity can have its own gallery of images. If you want to just store concept art or sketches, but you want to house them in under a specific entity, you can. And it will auto arrange and fit these images. Next, we have the Table Workspace, which shows you in a table view all of the entities and relations in your project. If I'm looking at the entities, I'll see the ID, name, type, and subtype. And then it autofills all of the relations where in this project where this entity is the source. It'll show you all the targets. It'll show you all the targets for each type of relation. You can also add and search to manage new relations. The relations, again, the event relation stores start and end. So in this table, you'll be able to see the start and end dates if they exist on the relation. Next, we have the Cladogram Workspace, which it needs a lot of work. But this shows you in a hierarchy sort of view all of the entities and relations. In the toolbar at the top, you can switch between the different relation types. So right now I'm looking at all the location relations. I can look at all the paths. But maybe this is more useful for something like genealogy or biological trees. There's a lot to be added to this workspace. For example, right now it cannot handle multiple different parents, so it won't really work for a family tree. But that's planned for this workspace in the future, is to be able to create those sort of hierarchy diagrams. Lastly, we have the network. And so as you use all of these other workspaces, this network will automatically update. And this shows you all of the entities and relations in your project. All the nodes here are the entities. All the connections are the relations. If I hover, you can see this is a contains relation. Contains. I can toggle, by default, it starts with only the contains on, but I can set all of the relations on. And you'll see it starts to look a little messy because these projects can get fairly complex. But at the top left, this filter lets you clear up the view. So if I want to look at only the characters and maybe the folders, or I'll look at all the entities, only contains, maybe only relation or location. Now this by default is in the 3D view, but in the top right corner you can select 2D if you want to look at only a 2D view. And you can switch between them. One more thing that I want to point out, in this top right corner, you see this little link icon. If I have that toggled on, when I double click, it will open in the workspace. When I have that toggled off, the double click will only open in the information panel on the right. I'll link it on, and now I can open them both. Lastly, there's this little lock icon. So let's say I'm working in the map. You'll notice this one is locked. And so if I go to the Map Workspace, it says I'm always going to work on this one in this workspace. I'll go back to the network, and it's back to Ralph. So I can change this to anything else, and I go back to the map, and it's still this one.